Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Business Process Management in Digital Transformation Projects. And on behalf of IIBA, thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar is a public event. It is designed to deliver practical resources for you as you continue to hone your skill set and deliver value within your organization. When you join IIBA, you become a member of an international association dedicated to developing and promoting the business analysis profession, with access to resources and community to support your development and career growth. At IIBA, we are all about uniting a community of professionals to create better business outcomes and to provide the tools to help you climb the ladder of success. And we are all here today to do just that. Today, we are joined with our presenter from Red Hat, Phil Simpson, to learn about their vision for process-driven applications and how a wide range of new technology are coming together to support the development of modern cloud-enabled process automation solutions. Phil is responsible for go-to-market strategy and positioning for Red Hat's business rules and business process management products. He has extensive experience with business rules and BPM, having held senior product management roles at an early business rules pioneer and senior marketing roles at several leading enterprise technology companies. We will have a question period at the end of the presentation. So during the presentation, if you have any questions, please enter them into the question box. And with that, I would like to introduce Phil Simpson.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Marlena. And hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I'm just going to switch over to my slides here. And I hope that you can now see my slides. So I'm delighted to be here. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to speak with you about business process management in digital transformation. Before we get into that subject matter, just a little bit about me. And thank you for that introduction, Marlena. I'm a senior product marketing manager at Red Hat, and I'm responsible for Red Hat's business process management and business rules products primarily. I have a fairly long history in this space. I think, yeah, certainly going back now 15, 20 years in BPM, so I've seen a lot of changes over the last few years. And I think this is really a fascinating subject and one that should be very relevant to most of you. I'm an avid fan of the IIBA, and I try to get to my local chapter meetings whenever I can. I live in the Boston area, so I try to get out to the Boston chapter meetings whenever practical. A little bit about Red Hat also. If you have heard of Red Hat, you may think of us as the Linux company. Red Hat was founded in 2003 and is primarily, even today, still very much known as an IT-focused IT enterprise software company, and best known perhaps for the Linux operating system. Red Hat Enterprise Linux is used in many, many data centers worldwide. It's one of the dominant operating systems used in the data center today. But we're very much more than that. We've grown tremendously over the last few years. When I joined about 5 years ago, I think there were 4,500 employees. We're now looking at around 10,500, 11,000 employees, and we really have a much broader portfolio of enterprise software. Still mostly focused on the IT organization, but rapidly now we're kind of branching out and addressing the needs of many business users as well. The thing that I think distinguishes Red Hat from most other organizations, though, is that we are an open source company. We're the largest open source company currently, and last year, we're deriving revenues around just over $2 billion from open source software, which is quite an achievement when you think about what we really do is we sell free stuff. We sell open source software that's essentially free. Our business model is based around providing services around that software. So we provide SLA-based support and consulting services and so on, and we have a model that involves subscriptions. Our customers pay us an annual subscription for support and service, and that's really our mission, is to bring open source software to the enterprise, provide the same level of service and support that you would expect from any of the larger proprietary companies, but to bring the innovation and value of open source. So the topic of this talk is business process management in digital transformation, and I thought just to start out with maybe to define some terms around BPM. I'm sure many of you are familiar with BPM technology, but just to get us on the same page, a few terms here. Business process, as I'm sure most of you are aware, business process is really the activity or set of activities that move work through an organization. So that the steps that are required to approve or deny an insurance claim, for example, from beginning to end. You can think about a business process as being the steps in that claim goes through, the people that it touches, the systems that it touches on the way. And then business process management as a discipline is very mature at this point. I've been involved in this certainly for the last 20 years or so. There's a lot of very mature methodologies around business process management, but essentially it's the systematic approach to making those processes more effective, more efficient, more capable, more adaptive, and so forth. And there are a lot of methods and approaches now that are very mature around how we do this and how we manage and understand and improve our business processes. And then lastly, business process management system, of course, is the technology, and it's really a collective term that refers to all the different types of technologies that many of us as business analysts use every day to understand, analyze, improve, optimize our business processes. So it really covers everything from modeling processes, drawing those diagrams, and something I'm sure many of you are familiar with, the flow charts that represent the steps in the process and the decisions that are taken as work moves through the organization, all the way up to systems that fully automate those processes, that drive work through the organization according to the steps defined in those processes. So with that, what I'd like to do is, actually, no, I have one more slide before we get that. So BPM, what I'm calling traditional BPM, then I think it's a very mature discipline. It involves work that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and you may be familiar with these terms as is and to be processes. A lot of us use these tools to model our processes, to understand how work moves through the organization, and potentially to optimize them, to figure out ways to make them better. And really, a large amount of the work that we do in BPM is all about documenting and understanding these processes. And quite often the deliverables that we deliver are the diagrams themselves. These are the things that we use to communicate and understand how the processes operate within an organization. Sometimes we use a BPMS to go and automate those processes, to actually build applications that automatically drive work through the organization. I would say even today that's probably still less than 50% of the processes out there that actually get automated, but the use of a BPMS is fairly widespread at this point. And the term BPM is generally associated, I would say, with fairly long duration, large budget projects that involve large cross-functional teams. Most BPM technology is very expensive. In order to derive ROI from that, is generally we're looking at the big processes. We're looking at the order to cash, the processes that drive revenue through the organization. And traditionally, BPM as a discipline is focused on things like efficiency, cost savings, formal methods and governance. We've developed a lot of methodologies, Six Sigma, Lean, and so forth, to kind of support us in this work. And it's very much focused on making our organizations more efficient, moving work through the organization more efficiently, making workers more productive, and so on. So with that kind of background, I would like to put up a quick poll to ask you guys, how you're making use of BPM technology today. So Marlena, if you could enable the poll. What I'd like to do is just get an understanding of, where you might be at as far as your use of BPM technology. Are you using BPM technology today? And if you are you using it to document internal processes, for example, or do you use it for external customer-facing processes? Do you support, are you using it to support new applications and so forth? On my screen, the poll is very small, and if you're not familiar with this technology, I believe you can undock the poll window from the screen and make it larger.
Yeah, and we're at 50% of our attendees have voted. So
oh, great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So we'll give another 15 seconds or so, and I'll close the poll.
Okay. All right, and I certainly very interested to see what the results are.
Okay, so I'm going to close the poll, and then I will share it with everybody. Are you able to see that, Phil?
I don't think so. I'm having trouble with the window. It's not. Oh, wait a second. Let me see if I can pull it up again. It's very small on my screen.
Okay, I can speak to it for you. So 37%. Yep, 37% use BPM tools to better understand and communicate key business processes. 19% use it to automate internal business processes. 5% use it to automate external business processes. 6% use it to support new applications that require BPM capabilities. And 33% are currently not using BPM tools.
Okay, great. Excellent. That's excellent, because that's actually very much in line with what I'm going to say next about how we're using BPM technology. So what's interesting here is the majority of you that are using BPM are using it kind of in the way that I described, to understand and communicate business processes, and that still is very much the norm, I think, in the use of the technology these days. It's still focused on internal value proposition for an organization. We're trying to make ourselves more efficient. We're trying to communicate better. Most of us are using probably modeling tools, maybe tools like Visio as the primary tool to do this, to capture the models and produce the graphs. It's also interesting that those that are automating are focused on internal processes, and that again is very much in line with what I mentioned earlier, that we're focused on efficiency and cost savings and so forth. So that makes a great deal of sense. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about what I've called traditional BPM, how BPM is traditionally used within organizations. The main point I'd like to make throughout this presentation is that things are changing, right? BPM has really stayed the same in terms of its goals for the last 20 years or so. But we're seeing a very significant sea change, if you like, in the industry, and something very important is happening, and that's typically what we mean by digital transformation, right? You may have heard this term very frequently over the last couple of years. Everyone's talking about digital transformation. Digital transformation is a response to something that's happened, and I've been looking for a good definition of digital transformation for a while now, and I've not really been able to find something that's very succinct and fits into one sentence. But I do have this quote which I think really sums up the mandate behind digital transformation. We spoke with one of our customers, an insurance company, the CIO, and we asked him, well, what's motivating your digital transformation projects? And this is what he said: we're doing this because now we have to compete against new disruptive startups that are hiring kids fresh out of college, drinking loads of Mountain Dew. On the face of it, that's kind of a flippant comment, but I actually think it's very insightful. Well, what he's saying is that there's more than ever before, established companies, established industries are being disrupted by startups that do not have the technical debt, if you like, of many of the incumbents. Many organizations across the board perhaps have long histories that they've built up an infrastructure over a long period of time.
And new computing models in particular, mostly cloud computing models, are enabling much smaller organizations to challenge these incumbents. You can now build a company without a data center, without a lot of computing infrastructure support. You can put all your IT in the cloud. You can build all your applications from scratch. You don't have to worry about compatibility with what you've already got out there. You don't have to worry about existing infrastructure. And it's now possible for small organizations to seriously challenge many of the incumbents, many of the large, long-established companies. And that's really what's driving digital transformation. Digital transformation is the response to that. The established organizations are finding that they have to transform themselves in ways that enable them to continue to compete. So when this particular CIO was referring to these kids fresh out of college drinking Mountain Dew, he was referring to people like this guy. This is a gentleman by the name of Michael Dubin. He famously disrupted the business of the Gillette shaving company, starting back in 2011, and you may be familiar with the story. Michael founded Dollar Shave Club and created a startup organization that was fully cloud-based. He put all his IT in Amazon and seriously disrupted Gillette's business. Gillette is a 100-year-old company that had been making shaving products, probably the best shaving products on the planet for a very long time. And suddenly this guy comes along with very little money, very little investment, built an organization that was able to undercut Gillette and make a serious dent in their business. The real story here, though, is the way that Gillette responded. Gillette needed to do digital transformation in order to respond to that, to go online, to create an online business. And this is by no means an isolated example, right? Here's a screen capture from a conference that's become very popular, the Collision conference. Collision is roughly 3 years old, and it's a conference of startups. It brings together startups and established companies. And I believe in 3 years, it's grown to about 20,000 attendees. Last time in New Orleans, there were 605 startups. Every one of these is disrupting their industry in some way. None of them have technical debt, and none of them have established IT organizations. They're all using cloud-based systems. They're all building brand new applications from scratch. And they are nimble, agile, and are the organizations that are keeping our CIOs up at night. So what's changed in the world of BPM is that we have this sudden mandate. We're suddenly finding ourselves as part of these organizations, these incumbent organizations, having to deal with this somewhat unexpected competition. So what does that mean for BPM? Does it mean that the BPM as we understand it is going to go away, or is it an opportunity? I think that digital transformation represents, in fact, a tremendous opportunity for business process management technology and for the type of work that we have long done as business analysts. Here's a quote from an industry analyst that talks about how business processes are assets that are key to innovation and digital transformation. And I think that this is very much in line with our thinking at Red Hat, that the response to the disruption and the competition has to involve business processes. The way that we are able to transform organizations digitally is even to some extent centered around business processes and business rules. So the technology is I think, really getting a boost from all of this, from all of the digital transformation projects that are going on. However, I do believe it needs to change. The BPM, the discipline, the technology, the value proposition. We need to kind of change our thinking around BPM and the value that we can bring to an organization. So on this graphic, the traditional BPM on the left, focus on efficiency, cost control. Efficiency and cost control is not going to improve competitiveness against these startups, against these new organizations. It's all about revenue generation. We have to be able to leverage technologies like BPM to acquire new customers and to drive new revenue. That's really how organizations have to compete. Otherwise, all you're going to see is a reduction in market share and so on. The way that we do things is going to have to change. And I've used terms here that are more IT-centric, but waterfall being the description of how typical BPM projects are organized. We're talking about long multi-year projects that try to define everything up front and get it right first time and move from an initial design stage through ultimately to production. The way to compete is to think about things in a more agile way, more iterative way, build prototypes and refine them over time. I think that the largest fundamental change, however, that the digital transformation is creating for those of us in the BPM space is that BPM in the past, traditional BPM has always been internally focused. And I think that was borne out quite a bit by the survey that really what we're focusing on here are our employees. We're focusing on our internal processes and we're doing stuff for employees to make our own staff more efficient, more effective. BPM has to turn outward. We have to look at customers as being the primary user of the ultimate, of the deliverables, if you like, from BPM projects. And this is, again, how we can compete, how we can drive revenue by acquiring customers and selling them things. And ultimately what that means is that the deliverable is changing. The traditional deliverable being a document, and as many of you said in the poll, that still is the traditional deliverable, the diagrams that we stick up on the wall and use to communicate around our organization, using notation like BPMN, the business process modeling notation. It's really transitioning, I think, to execution. We need to think about the result of BPM as being an application that is process enabled, that is engaging with customers and driving revenue for the company. And I think that is probably the most fundamental change that we're looking at. And as business analysts, what this means is that we're going to be asked to move away from simply producing documents and producing applications, to actually be directly involved in the construction of those applications, no longer just simply consulting with IT, but being responsible for and creating significant parts of the application code. And let me just elaborate on that a little bit, what that means. Here's a schematic that kind of describes the way applications have been built in the past, right? This is obviously highly oversimplified, but fundamentally, we rely on our IT department to build applications. They have developers that are very skilled in programming languages, and they'll be writing applications in languages like Java or JavaScript or whatever. They'll use tools that present a very engineering view of the world, an integrated development environment, and they generate code. And that code is ultimately becomes an application of some kind, generally internally focused, that somehow improves aspects of the way the organization operates. And we sometimes use this word monolithic to describe these applications. Monolithic applications basically just mean these applications tend to be very large, very hard to understand, and difficult to change. We see digital transformation driving a fundamental change in the way that applications are built within the organization. And I tried to illustrate on the right here what I think those key changes are. And there are two aspects to the schematic on the right that are different from the one on the left. The first is at the top of the diagram. Very important new technologies are coming along in the IT world to try to address this issue of monolithic applications. The applications are very ultimately difficult to manage and change. And you may or may not have heard of these technologies: containers, microservices applications. These are very important new ways that IT can use to build applications that are easier to manage, easier to change. I put these here because I think as business analysts, we're going to become more directly involved in the production of these apps. So if you're not familiar with these technologies, certainly recommend you might want to look them up and learn a little bit about them. But the other fundamental change is really represented by the lower part of this diagram here. What I'm saying is that new applications can no longer be built by IT by themselves. If we're going to respond to the competitive pressures and digitally transform our company, applications have to be built by business experts, business analysts like yourself, in concert with IT. And business users are going to be using different types of tools, business modeling tools, and producing models that we can think of in the same way as code. So the models that we produce might be BPMN diagrams or DMN diagrams that can be combined with code to produce these new applications. And so what this shows is this fundamental transformation of the way that applications get built. That if we're going to respond to these competitive pressures, we have to work much more closely with IT, and business analysts in general are going to become more focused on building applications than on simply documenting internal processes. You can think, another way to think of this change is think about the types of applications that have been produced in the past and those that we're now being asked to build. In the past, maybe at an insurance company, IT would build an application to record an insurance claim, something that they can do internally, something that is only used by internal users. Now the business is asking IT to write applications that sell insurance directly to customers. That's something that they don't teach you in computer science class, and something that requires business experts to get involved in. And I see this partnership becoming much stronger, and the technology enabling this partnership much more in the future. So BPM technology has to change in order to facilitate this. And one way that we're promoting this at Red Hat is just we're starting to think about BPM tools, BPM business process management systems, more as application development platforms than as tools to automate and optimize business processes. So it's a very high-level schematic of how we see BPMN in the future, or a BPM system. It'll have development tools, much like we do today, but we think of the models that we produce, if you like, as source code. This is code for an application. So the business users will be creating these models. Those models will get transformed into applications, merged with code from the IT department. And those apps will be executed in a BPM environment. But fundamentally, the difference here is we're now building applications. We're building applications that are externally focused, that are interacting with customers, that are using BPM concepts and ideas, but fundamentally we're building apps. And I think two of the very key languages, if you like, that we'll be working in are, as I've indicated here, BPMN and DMN. And you may already be familiar with these, but a quick summary here. BPMN is a business process modeling notation. It's very widely used to represent the steps in a business process. So this diagram might look familiar to many of you. And up until now, this may well have been the end result of the work that we do as business analysts. We're producing a diagram like this so that we can fully understand and communicate how a business process operates, and potentially look for bottlenecks, ways that we can make it better. In this new world, we're not looking at this as simply a piece of documentation, but rather as the source code, if you like, for an application. And in this diagram, I think there are three applications here that we have source code for. We have an application that the customer is going to use. In this case, it's a cab booking application. So we have at the top here, the top swim lane would be the customer application. We've got a kind of a back office application that the travel agent is going to use. And then we got an application for the cab driver on the lower part of this diagram. These are three distinct applications that will be ultimately generated from this diagram. And as business analysts, it's going to be our role to create these diagrams and add as much detail as is needed from the business side so that IT can add the remaining glue code and make this into an actual working application. The other source code, if you like, that I think we're going to be producing is related not so much to the business processes, but to the decisions that are made within the process, the business rules. And DMN is the notation that is gaining a lot of acceptance now as a way to represent business decisions. The business rule systems have been around for a very long time too, but have not really gained the kind of prominence that BPM has, partly because it's been very hard to represent business rules. The rules that, excuse me, the rules that underlie operational decisions that we make. So decisions around maybe whether or when we're going to pay an insurance claim, and the rules that govern that. DMN is a graphical notation that I think for the first time is making business rules much more accessible to the business. It enables us as analysts to thoroughly document and understand the rules involved in making a decision. What's also very interesting about DMN as a notation is that once we create a DMN diagram like this, it's actually fully executable. This is real source code. I can take this diagram with no further input, even from IT, and generate an application that will render a decision based on the information that's presented to it, according to the rules that are described here. We can fully create an entire working application from this model. So modeling tools that support DMN are starting to become quite popular, and Red Hat, we work with a number of vendors in that space. But creating decision-based applications is something, again, that I think will be starting to become very heavily involved in. So, of course, digital transformation is bringing together many more technologies. We've talked specifically about how it impacts BPM and rules. There's some other terms here that I think are also rising to the forefront as ways that we can make our organizations more agile and respond to this digital transformation mandate. And these are all kind of coming together into single solutions that ultimately provide a lot of that automation. So you may or may not be familiar with some of these terms. RPA is robotic process automation, and that's again, an older technology that's finding new life now, mostly driven by digital transformation projects that allows repetitive manual tasks to be automated fairly easily. AI is becoming very important. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on. We're seeing a lot more cognitive type technologies being deployed to support these types of projects. You may have come across this term low code. Low code is very much what we're talking about here. Building applications in non-traditional ways using simpler drag and drop business-oriented interfaces to do so. Writing applications without having to be necessarily experts in Java or JavaScript or anything else. And BPM, of course, is one of the underlying technologies there that ultimately leads to low code. Mobile, all of these applications will be consumed on mobile devices, so mobile technologies are very important as well. So there's a lot here and a lot of change, and I think it's all coming together in new ways to build applications that will affect us all, both IT and business analysts. I've also mentioned on here open source, the importance of open source. Obviously, it's something very, very close to us at Red Hat, but many of these technologies are open source, and I see open source being extremely influential now in terms of technology choices being made by many organizations. And certainly, I would encourage you to look at open source solutions when you're looking at these types of technologies. Excuse me. So just a quick example of what type of applications are we going to be building. Self-service applications is a category of apps that are very prominent in digital transformation projects. So by self-service, what I mean is exposing back office transactions to end users, end customers. So in the past, in order to file an insurance claim, a customer would typically talk to an agent or a representative who would use an application built by their IT department to file the claim. Now we want to expose that application directly to the customer so that they can file the claim themselves. technologies required to do this very much include those that we just saw earlier, but BPM, business rules, are very important. And I think the role of business analysts is increasingly prominent as we start to build out these applications. So a typical self-service application might kind of at a high level look something like this. We put together here a business process management system that's going to drive that process as described by perhaps a BPMN model produced by a business analyst. And we've got other technologies, mobile API management, that ultimately come together to create the end-to-end application for the end user. I put this up here because this is the kind of thing that I think as business analysts we're going to become increasingly involved with. We may not necessarily need to be experts in API management, but certainly we're going to participate in the creation of this application much more closely than in the past. We're going to be producing the models that business process application is using. We'll be writing BPMN and DMN that will be directly incorporated into that application. So it's going to have an impact on what we do as business analysts. Just a quick overview. I wanted to give you some understanding of where we are at Red Hat in terms of providing these technologies. As I mentioned, everything we do is open source. We do offer a product, BPM Suite, that is very much positioned as an application development platform. And it's designed to bring together business experts and developers. So we have a design environment called Business Central. So our business experts create the diagrams, the models, the developers create code that perhaps links those models to back-end systems, handles some of the lower level details, and together those are combined to create applications which can then run on what we call our process server. It can all run in the cloud, it can run in your data center, and so forth. The key here is we're building applications that can be changed very quickly, that interact directly with customers. We're able to use this type of technology to compete with these new startups that are entirely cloud-based and are able to disrupt business by being more agile. And the idea is to match that capability and get the organization involved in the same way that they are at these startups in producing these applications. I would like to also discuss a little bit about cloud. I mentioned cloud. All of the competition right now is coming from cloud-based organizations. We at Red Hat are very focused on cloud and being able to build these applications easily in the cloud. One thing we bring to the table that I think is unique is our heritage in the IT organization. So Red Hat understands how applications get built today. We understand how the data center works. If the business is to cooperate and collaborate fully with IT, it needs to be done in a way that works with the IT organization. And so many business analysis efforts today are kind of done in isolation, separately from IT. It's very important that the work that we do is compatible with the way that IT operates if we're going to build these applications. So we're very focused on that. This product, OpenShift, is the underlying platform that's used to build new applications. And by plugging BPM and business rules into OpenShift, we can participate as business analysts very easily in the creation of these new microservices-based applications using these new technologies like containers and so forth. And that really what I think is what sets our solution apart. And just a kind of a quick graphic to illustrate, this is the ultimate goal, right? We're looking to build an application. We're not looking now to create a document and stick it on the wall. We're looking to build a working application that is based on business process technology. So we have a process application here. We have that application interacting with other applications or other microservices within this runtime environment. As business analysts, we're contributing to the process applications, to the decision microservice here, maybe some of these others. And we're enabling agility within our organization. Whenever we want to change the way that we make an operational decision, for example. We can go in and change that decision microservice very easily using the tools like DMN in order to respond to competitive pressures or whatever. We can be very agile. And it is all going to work together with the applications that the IT organization is building. And with tools like OpenShift, with this container platform, we can run that anywhere. And that's very important now to organizations that we want to be able to put this in the cloud, or we want to be able to put it on a private cloud and run it in our own data center. We want to have that flexibility to move the workload wherever it makes the most sense. So this is really the goal, and I put this up here kind of as a suggestion of how we're going to move forward, how we're going to go from producing models and sticking them on the wall to ultimately producing applications that drive business for our organizations. So just to kind of wrap it up, I just wanted to give you a couple of examples. You know, that this is not just theory. We're working with many folks out there right now that are undergoing digital transformation projects and trying out these technologies and trying new ways of working. This one company, Rail Inc., is an organization we've worked with for a while. They maintain rail cars. It's a consortium of rail operating companies that maintains rail cars, and it's a very business rules heavy organization, because you want to make sure that you're optimizing your costs as you're performing preventative maintenance on hundreds of thousands of rail cars. There are a lot of business rules involved in deciding what car gets serviced at what point. And we've been using some of our technology here to help them in their digital transformation projects, and being able to improve not just the efficiency of their organization, but to respond more directly to their customers' needs, to build applications that their customers can use directly. And we've seen some very promising results. We've got some very significant improvements in internal operations, but also in customer satisfaction and the ability of their customers to directly work with their applications and do a lot of the work that previously would have been handled by internal agents. So that's a very significant success, I think. Another example from the healthcare industry, this is a health insurance company focused mostly on workers' compensation in the United States, a very process and rules heavy industry. Each state has its own set of regulations regarding how workers' compensation is handled and reported. And this organization was running afoul of that. We're running afoul of many of those regulations, finding itself being fined for non-compliance. But more than that, not really responsive to its customers, not responsive to its customers' needs, and kind of falling behind, potentially being the target of a disruptive competitor. So again, we're looking at helping them with their digital transformation project, looking at using these new technologies to help them with that. And we're producing process-driven applications. We're getting their business folks together with their IT folks, and they're working together using these tools to produce better business processes that are more responsive to their customers and offer more control, if you like, to their customers to ultimately improve their competitiveness. So I think the future is very bright for BPM. I think that we are looking at a massive transition over the next couple of years, and I do think it affects us as business analysts. And certainly, I think there's a lot of opportunity as BPM moves forward, but you know, it's a lot of change as well. There's a lot of change coming, and that can be a little bit scary, but I think it's ultimately tremendously beneficial to all of us. So if I do have a set of links here, if you're interested or would like to learn more about these ideas. Firstly, open source, as I mentioned, something very important to Red Hat, if that's of interest to you. The couple of websites here that are worth looking at. JBPM is an open source business process management system. That technology forms the basis for Red Hat's solution for BPM or BPM suite. And Drools.org is a very widely used business rules engine, probably the most popular open source business rules engine on the planet right now. Also very important technology that is the heart of our business rules management system. You can find more about Red Hat products on our website at redhat.com. Redhat.com/BPM suite is the home page for our BPM solutions. And if you're interested in trying out any of these products, and that's something I might recommend, I think that, as I've mentioned, as business analysts, I think we're going to get more involved with building applications. So you might be interested to go and try them out. So we have a website here where you can download these open source products and try them for yourselves. And also we have a very active blog, a lot of good ideas and a lot of debate takes place on our middleware blog, and I recommend that also as a resource. So one last thing I'd like to just quickly make a plug for BBC. I hope that many of you are planning to go to Orlando this year for BBC. We have a booth, and I'll be there. I'd certainly very much like to meet as many of you as I can. So if you're going to Orlando, please stop by our booth. I'll be very happy to talk to you about more about what we do and perhaps show you some of those products live. And finally, also, just to let you know, we are doing another webinar through the IIBA on October 25th, and that will also more focus on the upcoming BBC show, and we'll maybe have some demos there of this technology that we'll be showing at BBC. So thank you very much. I appreciate you spending the time with me this morning. I'm very happy to answer any questions, and I know that Marlene has been looking at the Q&A, so I'll hand it over to her in 1 second to go through any questions we might have. If you'd like to contact me offline, very welcome to do so. My email address is on the screen here, psimpson@redhat.com. I'd very much like to hear from you. So, Marlene, do we have any questions?
We do. We have a couple. The first question is, Phil, do you see a potential for BAs to become more like developers and developers to become like BAs?
Yes, I mean, that's, I think that is ultimately the message. I don't necessarily see business analysis and development merging into a single discipline. I see it much more as a partnership. I think, we're talking still about different skill sets. But what I think is important to understand is that as organizations conduct digital transformation projects, neither developers nor BAs can do it by themselves. And, we need to enable a much tighter cooperation, and ultimately what I think it means is that the product ultimately becomes a single product. So we're talking about building applications. We're not building business models and applications separately. We're building an application that incorporates all that business expertise, and that requires new tools and new techniques, as I've kind of described. So BAs will still be BAs and will still be modeling the business, but we're focused now on producing output that becomes part of an application that gets combined with code from the IT organization, and that's really the fundamental change. I think it's much more about working applications now than it is about diagrams and communication and simply communicating and understanding our processes.
In regards to that question, somebody has asked if you have any good reads, some recommended reads regarding this topic, any URLs that maybe that you could pass on. I don't know if you're able to do that at the top of your head, but
that's a good question. And there are a number of analysts, industry analysts that kind of follow this space that I might recommend. Certainly, folks at Forrester and Gartner have been fairly active in talking about some of these new technologies and what it means for the IT and business organization. Perhaps what I could do is I could put some together, and perhaps we could include them in a follow-up email. I'd be very happy to do that. Off the top of my head, no, but I think we certainly can find some, some analyst commentary that I think is relevant.
A question regarding RPA. What products are in the market for RPA, and is there benefits for BAs getting certified in RPA?
So RPA, there's a lot of fairly recent introductions. Probably the most widely used is a company called Blue Prism. There are many others, and in fact, again, if any of you folks have access to Forrester research, there's a fairly recent Forrester Wave report on RPA that lists a bunch of different vendors and ranks them and so on. Some of those are, the differences fundamentally are the types of environment they work in. Some of them are .NET, they're very Microsoft-centric, others are more kind of Java-based. It's still an emerging technology in some respects. We've always had the ability to automate some manual tasks by recording macros and things like that. And you can do this in Excel, right? You can create a macro that does something that saves a bit of time. The new breed of RPA technology tries to merge that with more cognitive approaches, artificial intelligence, to be able to automate a broader range of work. So I'd certainly look at Blue Prism. I'm trying to think who else. There's a number of other folks in that space. Is it worth being certified? I think it's definitely, it covers an aspect of work that business analysts should be involved in, much like, it's part of building these new applications. RPA technologies are likely to be integrated with the new breed of BPM and business rules technologies. So you may well find yourself creating a business process application and getting to a particular step, which you're then going to use some RPA technology to automate what otherwise would be a manual task. And we're working here to actually, integrate our products with some of the leading RPA vendors so that you can do that directly. So I think it's definitely something worth researching, becoming familiar with, and to the extent that your organization may have already made a technology choice, then definitely I would recommend becoming familiar with it.
Great. Question regarding business process modeling notation. Is there a BPM notation tool that you would recommend?
Yes, and again, there's a number of choices here. I know that many business analysts use Visio, use Microsoft Visio as a drawing tool, and I believe there's a BPMN plugin for Visio. So if you specifically want to draw a BPMN diagram and you're focused just on drawing the diagram and not automating anything, Visio is probably as good as any to simply create the diagram. If you're looking to do something a little more sophisticated, to perhaps looking for a collaborative environment where you can work together with other analysts and other business experts to create these diagrams and ultimately automate them, I would recommend a company by the name of Signavio. That's Signavio. That is a partner of ours. We've been working with Signavio for several years now. They're a medium-sized, rapidly growing company. They have a cloud-based BPM modeling environment, very easy to use, very collaborative. It works with Red Hat technology, so you can build a model in Signavio and then move it into the Red Hat BPM suite for execution. So it's part of this whole new paradigm of building applications. So certainly I'd recommend taking a look at Signavio. There are many other tools out there. And indeed, Red Hat's own tool, our BPM suite, includes modeling tools. So you can certainly build BPM models directly in BPM suite. We tend to focus more on the execution side of things, less on the business analysis side. But a good place to start, I think, as an analyst might well be Signavio. I'd certainly take a look at them.
Perfect. We have somebody who has said we have documented many of our processes using Visio. Is there a way we can import these to Red Hat so we can build I've got a tongue tie, executable models?
Right. Yes, there is, and Visio typically is just a diagramming tool and produces files that are purely graphical layouts. If you produced the model using the BPMN plugin for Visio, then I believe it's capable of producing a compatible file format, an XML file that represents the BPMN diagram. And I believe if you haven't done that, I think you can still obtain the plugin and then convert existing diagrams using Visio into that format. And if that's the case, then certainly you can import those XML BPMN files directly into the Red Hat product. So yes, in that sense you can.
Hey, and you mentioned that Red Hat software is open source. Does that mean it is free for us to use?
Yeah, and that's a good question. So I mentioned that our business model is fundamentally based around providing services around this open source software. You can certainly download and use the software itself as you see fit. You can use it for any commercial purposes. We charge a subscription fee for support services, access to our knowledge base, and so on. So generally what we find is that many of our customers start out just simply using the open source code. But when they're ready to go into production, they really want an organization like Red Hat standing behind that, offering them not just support services, but security fixes and so on. We have very active security group that will patch security issues as they come up and so on, and we'll make sure our customers are looked after properly. And typically at that point, our customers will subscribe, take out a subscription to cover that. But certainly the software itself is free to use, absolutely.
Perfect. So time for a couple more questions. Hi, Phil. What would you suggest to BA? So there were 33% from the poll that we took to start with who are yet to use any BPM tool.
That's a good question. I think BPM, as I mentioned, is critical to the success of digital transformation projects. So, folks that are not currently involved in BPM, I wonder if that's because digital transformation hasn't perhaps touched their company at this point. I believe that over time, all large organizations are going to be looking at digital transformation at some point. There's so much competition out there now, and that's going to bring in BPM. So I think in many of those cases, if you're not currently using BPM, I think it becomes a mandate at some point. I don't think you can successfully execute digital transformation without many of these technologies, BPM included, and many of the others that I mentioned. For folks that perhaps haven't had the opportunity yet to learn about BPM and learn about the techniques and the tools, there are many very good resources, and certainly some of the URLs that I put up earlier might be a good starting point. I would suggest potentially taking a look at the technology, doing some research in your own time, perhaps to get a little bit familiar, because I believe everybody is going to be asked to get involved in this at some point. It's just inevitable. I'd also point out that the resources from the IIBA, I believe there are many resources available, the body of knowledge and so on. There's a lot of information that you can probably derive and benefit you can derive from the IIBA as far as helping you get up to speed and understanding what's what the basics are at least. So I certainly perhaps would look to the IIBA for help for that as well.
Great. So actually it's 12 o'clock, and so it's the end of the presentation. I just want to thank you, Phil, so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. It's been great. Thank you very much.
And to everybody attended, thank you very much to you for taking the time to join us today. And just as a reminder that this presentation, along with the webinar recording, will be posted on our website under the webinar archives within 5 business days of this live presentation. So thank you to all of you, and thank you again, Phil, and everybody have a lovely day.